Hello everyone, welcome back to CAMNES Studio. We have received a very interesting question that reveals the misconception of a few aspects of what is archaeology, what does an archaeologist do, in contrast with a historian, the profile of a historian. Okay, so let's see. Robert Young wrote us, could you describe the similarities and differences between archaeologists and historians? My understanding is that archaeologists find and describe places, objects, and that historians interpret those findings. What do you think? Well, clearly, thank you very much, Robert, for this question. It's not what I think. The situation is, we could say, structured in a way different from what you are thinking, and I suppose a lot of people are thinking reasonably. I mean, if you don't go a little more in depth, it's difficult to really know what is happening. Okay, I'll try to give you a few coordinates to better understand the differences and what characterizes these two profiles. Okay, so first of all, I want to say that we have I'm going to mainly talk about from an archaeologist's point of view, but clearly in my studies and colleagues and things like that, I know exactly what a historian does and who he is. So turning back to the archaeologists, we can roughly frame three types. One who is merely dedicated to excavation, a technical excavator, okay? That type of person is just going to go in a place. He's not involved in a scientific project, usually. He's just going to excavate a specific context very well. He knows exactly how to read a stratigraphy and all the different problems that a context may have. He is going to document himself or with the aid of other people what the data, the situation, the information, and then he's going to hand it over, and that is where his job ends. Otherwise, we can have a excavator, as the one before, and also a researcher. And I would say this is the most common, probably, or at least at the pair with the third one, which we will see in a sec. What do I mean? Well, very simple. Besides curating, looking after the excavation part, once again, he can only mainly sometimes supervise, but he knows how things should be done and can judge if things are going in a specific direction, if they're wrong, if they're right, and also indicate how to change this, correct this. So even if sometimes maybe he's not materially doing these things, the excavation, he knows exactly how to do it, also because he did it for a long time in the past, like a professor. A lot of times he's just supervising. But most archaeologists still excavate, and as I said, they also do research. Absolutely. I mean, that is the most, I would say, interesting part. Clearly, not everyone can. I mean, it depends also what job you do, because we also need a lot of archaeologists who just do the technical work, who then the data goes to another archaeologist, usually, or simply is just being recorded and put there for the future. So an archaeologist who also does research, once he has the data of that excavation, of that context, of those artifacts, of the different types of data that he's going to receive, because it's not just a pot, the type of soil, the structures I found, and goodbye. No, I'll go more in depth in a sec. So he's going to start to interpret the data. Yes, absolutely. Archaeologists go very in depth in that. Also historians, clearly, but from a different point of view, and we're going to get there. The third type of archaeologist, I would say, is the one that does only research, that practically he's never involved in a new excavation project, though he deals mainly with archaeological data. And that sets him aside, separate him from a historian. And I'll tell you why. But the main difference is that an archaeologist that is just doing research, maybe, for example, just for public communications, broad public communications, lectures or a manual, or maybe he's teaching in class, but he's not active on the field, okay? Or maybe he's also publishing academic, scientific papers, no problem at all. But he's not, once again, involved actively in an operation, an archaeological excavation, which generates new information also. Okay, these are a little bit of the main elements that distinguish the main types, we could say, of archaeologists. So what is the main difference with historians? Well, clearly, by definition, as we all know, history starts with writing. So an historian is mainly focused on that part of our past where there are texts. Yes, he is mainly focused on text resources, okay? He is also, a historian, clearly going to see what an archaeologist is elaborating, his thinking, is interpreting on, for example, an area or a specific context, mainly because it's an important site and every discovery or new piece of information can really change or open up a specific part of history. A very simple excavation of an unknown site is not going to change history, and that's why an historian is not going to take into account. Or maybe at a statistical point of view, he may, meaning he's going to collect data from a lot of sites because he wants to prove or understand better something. So, once again, historians mainly focused on texts. Not only, I mean, there are these hybrid profiles, clearly, so don't think you're being categorized strictly. There are historians that could incline a little more towards archaeology, maybe because they had that imprint during their university studies. But I would say usually archaeologists are doing the work of historians. That's very common, actually. Because as I'm going to underline in a while with more details and examples, archaeologists have to do a wealth of things. It's not very linear. I mean, you really have to do a lot of different types of work, of activities. You have to know a lot of different types of knowledge, we could say, from different fields and combine them. It's fascinating, clearly. It gives you enthusiasm to do this work, but it's quite hard. I mean, it's daunting sometimes for a lot of people, precisely because you don't have these neat boundaries. You really have to reinvent sometimes your job, your work. So archaeologists actually must/should interpret data, okay? Even if they're not accurate, or they're maybe doing some mistakes, and sometimes afterwards they discover they were wrong, no problem. You just have to evidence this in your research, in your publications. Now I'm about to interpret my data or the data of someone else. No problem. This is not a problem. You just have to declare it, make it clear, not passing them as facts. That's fundamental. But it's a duty that an archaeologist should have. But I must admit that not everyone does that. Absolutely. As I said, we have those three categories. And a lot of times we could also identify a hybrid solution where people are excavating and simply there are just, maybe even publishing, doing some research, but they're just presenting the data how it is, meaning describing what they have achieved. And no or very little interpretation. So as you can see, we have different scales and situations where this is taking place. In fact, archaeologists draw, not everyone obviously, but a good number, especially I would say in the Anglo-Saxon American environments, draw heavily from anthropology, meaning sociology, economic anthropology, politic anthropology, but not only, I mean also ethnology. There are a lot of branches stemming out. Also historians, okay? Also historians do this, but I would say more at a broader scale, as we were saying before. While instead archaeologists do this because they are mainly focused on what? This is another big distinction. As we said, historians text. Well, archaeologists clearly are mainly focused on material culture, meaning objects, okay? What you can touch, or the context, which is not something you can immediately touch, but it also composed by physical elements. But not only, a lot of times you have to understand what was going on from these clues. And that is also the fascinating part. When someone asks me, what is the most interesting thing you ever excavated? It's not that, but is actually understanding what happened in a context. And when things start to click in and you're really understanding what took place and what produced what you're finding, that is the most rewarding sensation, I believe, for anybody that is trying to excavate and understand our past. So, once again, this is something a little more connected to archaeologists, a special type of archaeologist, let's say. Not all of them draw on anthropology, but it's necessary because anthropology mainly is focusing at that point on behavior, on lifestyle, okay, which are strictly connected to the material culture, the objects, while instead historians work more at a statistical level, at a broad scale level. They gather the information and analyze the facts to recreate the history of a specific culture, period, era, territory, etc., etc. Another branch that many archaeologists are dealing with, and I would say currently more and more, and this is a positive thing, and then historians practically don't deal with not at all, is archaeometry. Meaning the lab reports, analysis, the data processed from a more scientific, we could say, point of view. Meaning, the radiocarbon datings or the pollens of a specific area, the seeds, the bioarchaeology, so-called, where you analyze all the different species and remains of vegetable type of data, or the different types of bones, the different kind of anthropology, studying human bones, human remains, but also zoo archaeology, animal remains, but also at a more microscopic level, we could say, like, for example, the isotopes that we can analyze in the teeth of these animals can tell us a lot, the pathologies. There's so much, the residues that you can find in the pottery, for example, or on the lithic instruments. There's so many types of lab analysis of archaeometry that is going on, and that is mainly done by archaeologists. Clearly, the data then can be collected and re-elaborated in order to create history models, or the reconstruction of the history of a specific, as we said, area, period, culture, etc. But it's more of a secondary phase, and it's not produced by the historian. Absolutely. He's going to elaborate that part. But usually it's the archaeologist that collects everything and goes ahead. And that is why so many things are done by archaeologists. Sometimes it's almost... It may seem almost unprofessional how many things an archaeologist has to do, and he has to do them well. But it's a necessity. You have to do it. A lot of times, it's better if you're taking control of all these stages in order to furnish a more plausible and more complete reconstruction of that specific context you are excavating and studying. Archaeology in general has so many nuances. Like, for example, before I said that historians are mainly focused, mainly more focused, let's say, on broader containers, meaning large periods of time, an entire culture, an entire civilization, a specific large territory. But also archaeology does this. For example, the so-called landscape archaeology, or more spatial archaeology, where you are studying the different elements present in a very broad territory, from a symbolic point of view, anthropology, from a lifestyle, maybe we have some nomads moving around, we have sedentary communities, the resources, how they are exploited, the movements of these, the influences, how pottery travel from one way, or maybe the styles. There's so many things, and these are mainly done, curated by archaeologists. So I think it's safe to say, even though a lot of people are not going to agree, that an archaeologist can be also an historian, as we said before, but not vice versa. You can't say the opposite. And as I said, there's so many elements and aspects that an archaeologist has to curate, has to look after, has to develop. Like myself, I wrote down a simple chain, strictly related, we could say, to the archaeological data. So first of all, we have to dig. We have to record what we are finding, because when you are excavating, you are destroying the situation there. Yeah, you can leave a portion of the excavation for the future, but I mean, what you are excavating is being destroyed, and it's going to disappear forever unless it's only one structure. You're cleaning it out. There you have it, and you're going to restore it and keep it forever, but that's rare. Then you have to organize the data that you are recording and receiving, meaning drawings, pictures, the different types of analysis. Conduct analysis on specific types of, as we said, soil, bones, pottery, etc. Then there is the interpretation phase, very important. While you're writing your output, you're putting your output, and finally there's going to be the publication of the data, which is fundamental and is, I would say, a mandatory for an archaeologist, because that is why we are excavating. If that is your role, clearly, if you just have to do a specific part in this chain, no, clearly, but usually that is what you're supposed to do. Interpret and publish. That is your output. And I would say that's what we're doing at CAMNES a lot of times. Also, connect with the public. I mean, dedicate attention to the community archaeology, public archaeology. So communicating what you're doing, involving the public, the people, where possible, in the activities and the understanding of what is happening, what is taking place in that excavation, and create also products dedicated to broad public, meaning lessons, these videos that we're doing on CAMNES Studio, dedicated publications, and things like that. That is absolutely part of the whole process, all the way up to the display in the museum, which also sometimes is curated by archaeologists. Absolutely. Okay, guys, I hope this is a little more clear. Thank you for watching. Please send your questions at ask@camnes.org. We are very interested in hearing your questions, because it gives us some motivation and some ways to communicate this information to you. And what else can I say? As you know, understanding the past explains the present and defines our future. Thank you. Hi guys, if you want to discover more about archaeology and our ancient past from a different perspective, make sure to click on the CAMNES logo here below. And don't forget to turn on the notification bell so you will never miss an episode and join the archaeological community in search of the truth.